Hello, everyone. Welcome back. A lot of familiar faces here, and very excited to see a lot of our customers, users, prospects, partners in the room. For those of you I haven't yet met, I'm Enda, COO and co-founder here at Sequence, and very excited to have you all here at our first annual summit, which, based on the initial feedback, I think will definitely make an annual recurring theme because it's really exciting to see a room full of the smartest people in finance and RevOps from the leading AI and SaaS companies here in one room. So really excited. The next panel is a topic we think a lot about at Sequence. A lot of the companies that we work with, there's typically two main scaling motions that we see. You start PLG, you gradually move up market in enterprise sales-led deals, or you're sales-led from day one. And as you scale, you start to layer in a self-serve PLG motion. What a lot of teams underestimate is the operational complexity of actually managing those pricing motions in tandem. Not only in terms of actually managing the upgrade process when a team moves from being entirely self-serve to sales-led, but in terms of the actual revenue tooling that you need to scale a PLG motion versus a sales-led motion. A good example of this is, over 50% of our revenue here at Sequence actually comes from Stripe billing migrations, because it's an easy starting point for a lot of PLG teams who use Stripe as a payments gateway. They add on Stripe billing. It works well in the PLG space, and we have a ton of admiration for Stripe as a payments gateway and as a PLG platform. But as teams move up market, as they move into sales-led deals, they quickly break the limitations of what something like Stripe billing can do. And it's the same for other legacy tools like ChargeBee, Maxio, who are built for more of the V1 subscription SaaS era. This is where I think we're really excited at Sequence to be able to work with a lot of companies who have dual pricing motions. And I'm very pumped to welcome 4 panelists who have experience scaling both pricing motions. And we're going to hear from teams who have started PLG and gone up market into the sales-led world. And on the flip side, teams who are currently fully sales-led, preparing for the shift to PLG. So with that, we'd love to welcome up our 4 panelists and jump straight into the discussion.
Hey everyone, I'm Harrison. So I'm at Attention. We're a Series A conversational intelligence platform. I think an apt metaphor now that we're at this Sequence conference is that what Sequence does for sales team, or what Sequence does for finance teams, Attention does for sales teams. So we help sellers automate all the busy work that they don't like doing, like updating their CRM, drafting follow-up emails, and we have all sorts of agentic products that provides customized scoring, deal risks, and insights that give sellers superpowers. And in terms of my role at Attention, I'm on the biz ops and growth team. We're a lean and mean team, and I'm a generalist by trade, but I'm a Sequence customer. I'm a Sequence power user, managing our finance and billing functions at Attention, as well as do some work in customer communications, product analytics, and growth. And as for your question about SLG versus PLG, from our founding, we've been a sales-led company. It's been a very intentional decision. Each Attention instance is highly customized to our customers' use case, their sales methodology, and the specifics of their CRM. And so with this consultative sales process, it's always made sense for us to be very intentional as to how we roll out our product to our customers. We have a team of 4 deployed engineers as well that build out the Attention instance and build tailored workflows and agents for our customers. However, we are excited to be moving towards that hybrid path and launching a PLG motion later this year. We're super excited about that, and I'd say there's 2 primary triggers for this decision. The first is just on the demand side. We have a lot of customers or prospects that we have to fortunately turn away right now just because it hasn't been efficient for us to walk them through our sales process and support them just based off the size of their team. And the second trigger is really our product maturity and new features that we've built. We now have some really great out-of-the-box workflows and agents that don't need that high degree of customization, are super differentiated, and can create value for our customers from day one. And as we've started to scope out and build this PLG path, which we're still very heads down doing, it's been a great opportunity for us to reassess and reimagine our onboarding experience and inject AI into our onboarding experience from day one as well to create really great self-serve motion for both our sales-led and our future product-led path. So what that means is from day one, we're able to look at a customer's CRM, for example, and auto-suggest what fields they'd want to map from attention into their CRM. We are building out prompt optimizers and out of the box, like one-click imports from existing call tools and things like that. So as we've started to think about, all right, how do we support some smaller teams without salespeople, attention salespeople in the loop? Let's make our onboarding as smooth and frictionless as possible and create that value out of the box. That's going to be really great for supporting both the sales-led and product-led path.
Yeah, if we have time, it'll be really interesting to hear about how you're also thinking about the competitive dynamics of moving PLG, where there's an entirely different competitor set of like self-serve, cheap note takers that you can launch very cheaply versus the broader agentic platform that you have at attention. Calvin, I guess Pylon is somewhat unique as well across this panel in that your pricing is fully public across all tiers, despite the fact that you're actually sales-led in, I think, the mid-market and the enterprise. So I'm very curious what drove your decision to actually keep that pricing public versus maybe giving sales more flexibility to negotiate deals like Harrison has described.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Prior to Pylon, I think I was, like you, very much in the weeds of pricing and packaging. I worked for a smart and amazing CFO, and every time we talked about pricing and packaging, it was bundling, unbundling, SKUs, discount thresholds. You're all familiar with all this stuff. And when I joined Pylon a couple of months ago now, it was the complete opposite. We were a 30-person Series A company scaling super quickly, and we did not want to think about pricing and packaging at all. So we did something a little bit cheeky and essentially just ripped off Zendesk's pricing structure completely. So if you went to Zendesk's website and Pylon's, you would see the exact same numbers, structure, and everything. So while we did that for velocity's sake, there were actually a lot of really interesting benefits. It made the conversation shift from negotiation and discounting to purely a product play. The question became, do you need this sort of omni-channel support with Slack, Discord, Teams, call recorder information, or are you okay with the legacy incumbent solutions? And so in a way, this simplified pricing really just made the question, do you want Pylon or not?
Yeah, and I'd be interested to hear down the line as well, like if you, I guess, consider removing sales from more of those deals as well as the product matures and you've even more confidence that you can just let someone loose, maybe doing a quick proof of concept themselves and not needing to invest all those resources in Slack channels and Teams. Because I think any of us who sell through Slack as well, that can get extremely noisy very quickly as well. And I think part of that you want to engineer into the process because it allows you to be very high touch, but the ACVs also have to be worthwhile to pulling in AEs and maybe even solutions engineers on those deals as well. I guess in contrast to that, Mohit, at Incident, you run more of the typical, I guess, PLG enterprise motion. You've got some public pricing for the earlier stage tiers right up to the enterprise motion. I know you've a lot of experience in that space, having scaled Cloudflare as well before Incident. I'm curious how you think about the upgrade process for a company that starts PLG. Let's take Pylon, for example. They would be a good example of a company that might have started on Incident with maybe 8-10 engineers, and as they scale now well beyond Series B into 6, 7, 8 figures of revenue, 7, 8, 9 figures of revenue more than likely. How that upgrade process happens. When do you involve sales into that market motion?
Firstly, thanks for having me. Quick introduction, my site TLDR. I'm a failed programmer who got into tech sales, and now I'm spreading my ignorance running sales and success teams at Incident, and I was a prior VP of sales at Cloudflare before. In terms of your question, as much as I'd like to have PLG, product-led growth fully at Incident, we don't have that. I see them as two sets of audiences. And maybe a little bit of context about Incident. We are, essentially sequence for technical, incident management teams. We're using AI to help orchestrate your incident management workflows. Everything that happens, post getting paged, by PagerDuty or Opsgenie, right? And we integrate into Slack and Teams, and essentially we're a communications platform now, increasingly, leveraging AI as a co-pilot there. So the audiences that I sell to, the Oktas, the Zendesks of the world, the again, I don't know if this is Chatham House rules. I can't mention some of these customers. Hopefully, this doesn't get out. Some really large organizations that derive, tremendous value because they have very complex engineering organizations. Netflix has 3,500 engineers across 200 plus teams using us. Now they have mapped out, every microservice that gets, what are the teams that are supporting each microservice, right? Each part of their infrastructure stack. So those are the sorts of customers I have to work with on a, contracted basis. And the sales motion is very different, right? You get into, field events like this. You're, cold calling people, hospitality dinners, what have you. So that's one end of the spectrum. And then our self-serve plans, you see startups, right, largely. And the value, again, derivation comes from complexity within engineering teams, which means they may not care about what we're offering, right? The SLAs, the feature richness that we offer on those plans. By virtue of this, the sellers look different and the sales motions are different, right? So I've already described the kind of profiles of sellers I would hire, the sales motion, the marketing motion. For the larger enterprises, for startups, it's, they grow with us, right? Now the sellers, so we have a dedicated team. They look more, CSM and AM shaped. They're more technical in nature. I wouldn't call them forward deployed engineers, right? We're selling a non-technical product to technical audiences, so we don't necessarily need that. And they're looking for signals. Hey, this company raised, funding, which means they're going to expand on their engineering teams, which introduces complexity. So now they need to start thinking about, some of the contracted plans. How has their engagement been with support? Are they liking the SLAs that they've signed up for? Are they demanding more? So on and so forth. So hopefully that answered the question, and that's what we're kind of dealing with, at least in our business. Cloudflare may have been a little bit different.
Yeah, if I can ask a quick follow-up on that about like maybe how that changes when you're a multi-product business, because we're instant customers at Sequence here as well, and I know one of the big launches that is kind of, I think it's just shipped, is the AI SRE, and like that's an entirely new product that you're bringing to market, and I think a lot of the teams here are multi-product as well. I'm curious, at your scale now, how you think about maybe a different PLG motion for new products. Like, how do you try and retain the same pricing motion for both, or do you treat it at bottoms up on each product that's launched having its own go-to-market motion in terms of PLG versus sales-led?
I think the sales motions won't necessarily change because the audiences kind of still stay the same. But the AISRE product will deviate away from seat-based pricing. It's going to have consumption-led pricing. Again, we're still working on this. We're going to GA this in Q4. So it adds another dimension to our pricing and packaging. I don't expect the sales motions necessarily to change. What I do expect is, again, I don't want to mention some of these customers. They're leading startups, and they're kind of upending, the usual paradigm where the larger they become in terms of revenue, right? Their engineering teams kind of grow with that. We're seeing some startups kind of challenge that paradigm. So what I expect though is, I think I can talk about Linear, their customers. So they, for example, are like sub 100-person team, fantastic logo, growing really fast, but I can't really upgrade them to, like, even if as an enterprise contracted customer, the deal value is going to be lower, right? But with AISRE, they're going to have a ton of incidents because they're supporting that many customers. So I expect an acceleration of some of these customers upgrading into enterprise and seeing more value through volume discounts, for example.
Ibrahim, you're running finance at Descript, who also have a meaningful PLG revenue component. One thing we talk a lot about with customers is like ARR reporting as well around PLG versus sales-led contracts. I think we're all hearing the massive AI growth stories of ARR numbers going from 0 to 100 million in a year, but really a lot of that is PLG revenue that's being annualized, and the trade-off there is that it can also be cancelled very easily, right? Like, we all have budgets to play around with AI. You can sign up to Lovable, N8N, Cursor, but we can all cancel it on a one-click Stripe subscription tonight if we wanted to. So that is very different revenue to selling 2 to 3 year enterprise deals, which probably have positive NRR, new products being added on. So I'm curious how you're thinking about that in investor conversations and in board meetings, on how you're breaking out that reporting conversation and managing investor expectations when it comes to PLG revenue versus the more sticky, sales-led side.
Sure. First, let me introduce you to Descript. Descript is an AI video editing tool that is used by millions of creators and businesses alike. And it's mostly known by pioneer text-based editing and also bringing AI text-to-speech editing into the editing suite. Very quickly at Descript, I lead finance and operations. So That means as a startup, wearing multiple hats. So I lead our finance team, our RevOps, and go-to-market engineering team, as well as our customer support team as well. And even up to a few weeks ago, we're still leading our sales team, but finally passed the baton to someone more qualified that I am on that as well. But yeah, so just to answer your question, I think we talk a lot at the company about quality of revenue, and the quality of revenue obviously is really different from when you sell like us to a Fortune 100 company that is a committed contract over a couple of years versus like a consumer that is just using Descript for a specific project. So the way we do it and the way we kind of try to break it up for investors' conversations, as you mentioned, is I think it's really a question of segmentation and durability on the revenue side. So what we try to show is kind of how different pockets of our business are performing. So what we typically do is we break out our business in segments between, let's say, individual self-serve businesses and also the enterprise segment. And then based on that, we show like different cuts on revenue. So that's mostly how we kind of build that. Also as well, I think what's something new that most of you probably have right now, it's about usage-based revenue, which is not fully recurring per se, but could be somewhat predictable. So a way to display that information to an investor as well is to differentiate what we would consider true ARR and true recurring revenue versus like what we call usage-based, some sort of predictable revenue as well. And so that's kind of the breakdown that we have at the company.
Given both Mohit and Ibrahim talked about the switch to usage-based, like one thing we see a lot of is like any company now that's moving towards any agentic modules is playing around with either usage-based or outcomes-based pricing. Harrison, Calvin, like you're both launching agents across the platform. I'm curious if you're also having similar conversations around switch to more consumption-based models at the moment, and if that's going to impact at all. Like, would you roll that out across PLG and sales-led customers, or would you maybe retain it for one segment? I'm curious how you're thinking through that evolution.
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation we're having. I wouldn't say we have a definitive answer to that question yet. Right now, we are primarily seat-based pricing, but we do have the infrastructure down the line for some usage as well. And I imagine for our PLG path, there would be some degree of a cap of how many tokens or tasks they can run with our agentic products. And to some extent, we'll have the same for our sales-led paths. But again, it's the early innings for us, so I can't say with definitive certainty.
For Pylon, we will definitely allow our sales-led customers to incorporate the PLG motion in some capacity. The thing that I'm not going to do that I did at my last company, which gave me a lot of headaches, was try to incorporate reporting into the same format. Definitely going to keep these separate, as you had mentioned.
So I guess to play to Harrison's advantage here, I mean, he's got 3 people who've gone through the PLG setup. Harrison's thinking about going PLG in the next couple of months. In a similar vein to what Calvin just mentioned, what's one piece of advice you would give Harrison as he plans to make this switch towards PLG potentially in the next year? Mohit, maybe start with you.
I think I agree with what you said in terms of, pricing and packaging on consumption-driven products to make sure that you're selling, some kind of consumption credits or tokens. It's contracted, amounts. Ideally, use it or lose it. Otherwise, you have revenue recognition issues, right, at a later point. I've been through that at a company I worked at. They adopted a snowflake-like model where, again, you're reporting to the board, revenue recognized over the last 12 months, plus, RPOs sold essentially. So that's one piece of advice from me.
While we work down the remaining 2, I want to say I will open up as well to the audience as well, maybe to ask. We will probably have time for maybe 2 questions. So just to give a heads up, I'll try and leave 3 minutes at the end. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to iterate on my last point, when we were building out the hybrid motion at GEM, I was asking colleagues, many of you in the room probably, about tips on how to incorporate this. I asked James Lee at Asana, who did this, and he said, keep PLG out of Salesforce or you'll regret it forever. I put it into Salesforce, and I regret it forever. So that is my advice.
I don't know if I have a formal advice. We definitely don't have PLG into Salesforce, so that's already one thing. I think I want to relate about the experience we have at the company, where when you're building PLG and enterprise, we always have this sort of tension about the product vision. So I think the packaging is really tricky. So we have a sales team that is really pushing for us to gate features on the self-serve side because we want to push on the enterprise upsell. But at the same time, when you have a fairly large and efficient self-serve motion as we have, obviously it's hard to kind of make the cut and say that we're going to gate that. So I think having a really clear vision about what is your enterprise SKU, I think is really important, and how you want to differentiate that with self-serve, because I think you will see a lot of tension on the go-to-market side. It's always hard for us, for example, to have marketing resources to push into the sales-led motion. It's always tricky on the product side as well to prioritize some enterprise features when you have a lot of PLG as well. So I think be prepared for that tension, and that would be my piece of advice.
Ibrahim, sorry to follow up again before I open it to the audience, but I think there's very few finance leaders here who have had to directly manage a sales team as well. Like, it would be remiss not to ask, has that changed maybe any of your thinking around how you analyze sales performance now on the finance side? You're scaling, revenue very quickly, moving into the sales-led portion. You've been hands-on with account executives now for, I guess the last 2 years. Has anything shifted in terms of your perception of sales, how you manage their performance?
Do you empathize with them?
I don't know if things are really. I've been close to sales team for quite some time, but yeah, I mean, salespeople are very coin-operated, I would say, compared to definitely people on my team, like on the strategic finance team, for example. I think what really changed my perspective is to be really close to the customer, like being able to be on a lot of sales calls. I think give you a better appreciation when you're like jumping into pricing and packaging conversations, when you're looking into have just strategy conversation about the company. So I think that has been really, really great for me. And I really, really appreciate kind of the efforts into the sales team, like building a kind of a 0 to 1 sales team is really tricky, and hiring like founding sales AEs is a tricky job as well. So I always have a lot of appreciation for that motion as well.
Yeah. Although I have no idea what you mean about the coin-operated point, at least from Sequence. Want to open it up to the room. If there's any questions, I have another one here, but I also don't want to be selfish here. There's a ton of wisdom on the stage and want to open it up to anyone in the audience. So I'm not sure if we have a second mic. I will do a quick run here. Awesome. So if anyone wants to shoot up their hand if they have a question, yep, one at the front here.
Curious to know, what tools were you guys using before Sequence? Did you have to rip and replace anything out? Or was it because you were early enough, you could just put Sequence in as the foundational platform?
What a great question.
Stripe, right? You said half of your revenue comes from that motion. Yeah, we were using Stripe.
Okay. But you're still using Stripe for your...
I believe so. I believe so, yeah.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. There you go.
It's all over.
We're using DocuSign and Stripe as well, but we hadn't really deeply integrated into Stripe, so it was very manual work in Stripe that we can now automate with Sequence.
Sorry, and did you guys rip out the other one? You're not using both?
Yeah, we ripped out, yep.
We're not customer of Sequence yet, I will say. So not yet. So we're pretty well in depth into Stripe, which is our billing platform, and all our data stack and our data tables. Everything lives on top of Stripe. So, and we're building our sales-led motion. So we're thinking about what is the right stack for that as well. But again, like the data consideration is quite important for us as well. So we're thinking about how we can have one source of truth and updating all our ARR tables as well. So yeah, so not yet on Sequence, maybe, but that's our view right now.
Pylon is also not using Sequence yet, but I'm sure we will soon.
There's a reason they're both surrounded on both sides on the panel. I will say it's a great question though. Like in terms of like half our migrations, our revenue comes from Stripe migrations. It's usually sales led, which is the trigger. And we do have many cases where we might start with a migration of just sales led customers to start with. You build that conviction internally, you get those customers up and running, and then you migrate the PLG customers, because there's usually an engineering reliance on the PLG side where there's either feature provisioning tied to something like Stripe, or typically that's usually what you have in place, and mostly Stripe is very API driven, so it's usually been set up by the engineering team in the first place. So there's sometimes a phased approach, but the goal, usually, to the reporting point as well, you don't want to have two billing motions in place for very long. Like, it just makes ARR reporting, downstream processes very messy when you've got a separate source for PLG, a separate source for sales led. Any others? We've got room for one more. Yeah, Nigel.
Hi, this is Nigel from Arcade. So my question is, for businesses that have both PLG and sales, do you guys find more success in tapping into the PLG user base? And Mohit, to your point, I think the PLG user base is a very different type of company versus the enterprise, or success doing more outbound.
Some of those self-serve companies become the tech-forward enterprises, right? And I guess if I understand your question correctly, we do deviate from typical motion that I would employ for most startups that are seed, Series A. If you see the linears or those sorts of customers in there, you're now being more high touch, right, in your motion. I wouldn't call it outbound though, right? They're a customer at the end of the day. There's a breach of trust there when you're and tone deafness if you're like placing cold calls. So try to get them engaged. Set up ploys like this, right? Get them speaking at events, about your usage, things like that.
So for us, that we have also PLG and enterprise, I think it really comes with how your self-serve plan is really built. So we have a fairly generous self-serve plan. So obviously, when it comes to go to the sales-led or the enterprise, the question is what's in it for them, especially for the end user. The buyer always has some pros like SSO or security or whatever like that. So I think it's really depending on how your enterprise plan is built and how you can build value to the end user. For us, I think that's still something we're figuring this out. A lot of our enterprise customers actually came straight to enterprise most of the time. And so we're building that kind of motion of like self-serve being a pipeline for the enterprise as well. We have a lot of companies are graduating from self-serve going to enterprise, but we have a fair amount of very large companies on self-serve yet.
So we're at time, and I know we're a couple of minutes behind the agenda, and there's a stacked lineup of speakers and panels to follow, so I'm going to leave it there. I hope the panelists won't mind me offering, if anyone wants to come up and continue any of the topics discussed, feel free to approach them afterwards and even learn a little bit more around the companies represented. But massive thank you to the group. This was awesome.
Thank you.